Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure to whom to address this question, but I'm curious about 77 million for Space Force OCO. I think of OCO as overseas contingency operations. Are we 77 million people up in space, or what's, I'm just curious. What's the 77 million for OCO for Space Force?
Well, it's, in just our conference, it seems likely that is places like Thule, the Arctic, Alaska is considered OCO, those would be
People manning space-related facilities, is that what we're talking about?
so the space-related facilities and the manning of them.
If you could give me a little
That
more
would be helpful.
robust information, I'd appreciate it. Madam Secretary, how are we doing on the sustainment cost of the F-35?
It's
Are we going
being
to be able to afford to keep it?
it's one of the topics of great attention. It is being driven down, but it is, from our perspective, too slowly and still too high. We have a commitment that by the year 2025, it would be at $25,000 per hour, and we hope we anticipate that will be achieved.
So you're continue to make this a priority because
certainly is.
it's a serious ongoing issue. I mean, we're not going to be able to sustain this important asset indefinitely at the kind of cost that we're talking about now.
Agreed.
Sure, if I could jump in as well. So I met with the CEO for Lockheed Martin and all the CEOs who are partners in this, and told them that the current flying hour costs are unaffordable, and the sustainment enterprise was not scaled to the size of the fleet. So we worked through about a 3 to 4 month sprint, both with the Joint Program Office and the company. And I went to Lockheed and walked through all the things they're doing in the sustainment enterprise, and I will tell you that they've made some significant changes to the point where I'm more confident that we're going to be able to drive to that lower flying hour cost than we were 6 months ago.
Could you supply for the committee some data and
Yes,
written
sir.
material on this issue? Because I think it's one we just don't want to let it get away from us.
Be happy to.
Madam Secretary, I noticed there's an increase in end strength of about 1,500 people. Are any of those, I hope some of those are maintenance personnel, because I understand that's a bottleneck in terms of readiness. How are we doing on maintenance personnel, techs, to keep these airplanes flying?
Historically, that has been a confining topic. Some good news is that in the active duty force, our maintainers are up to speed at this point. We're still working on the Guard and Reserve count.
How are we doing on recruiting? Are you meeting goals?
On maintainers.
General?
Sharon.
We are, sir. And the good news on the maintenance is we've actually filled in what was a 4,000 shortfall. We got that down to 0. We still have some work to do in the Guard and Reserve on maintainers. When it comes to recruiting, we are meeting our numbers. One of the things we've done recently is we've gone to total force recruiting. We pulled Guard and Reserve and active into one recruiting command. And so now when you go to a strip mall, you don't see 3 different storefronts. You see one United States Air Force, because quite frankly, for the Secretary and I, you know, when a young man or woman wants to join the Air Force, we don't really care which component they join. They're joining us.
Because we have an integrated force in reality.
Because it's an integrated force.
Now,
So
the Army is doing some work on diversifying the geography of their recruiting. As you know, in New England or in the Northeast, there are very few military facilities left, and we really don't want the military to be regionalized. Are you attending to that issue?
we are, sir, and we're also looking at it especially through how do we hire civilians. You gave us authority to direct hire civilians faster, and so this is a competitive market. This is a fight for talent. And so now with those authorities, we're able to go to universities, many of them in New England, and direct hire folks into the Air Force. And especially, I think, as Chief Raymond looks at how he builds the Space Force, there's some really creative things that we might be able to do there with the authorities that you've given us.
I appreciate that. And if you need additional authorities or if there are other bottlenecks, let us know. One final question. General Lyons was here a week or two ago and talked about the impending gap in refueling capacity, which was he identified as one of the most serious threats that we face. We can't project power unless we have refueling capacity. Is there a plan? Is there how are we going to meet that 5 to 7 year problem that appears to be imminent?
So the first thing is, in terms of mitigation, we've committed to him and to the Secretary of Defense that if we were in a major contingency, every KC-46 would be put into the fight. We're comfortable that it's capable of doing operations in a high-end fight.
Even with the deficiency?
Even with the deficiency. I would not put it into day-to-day operations, but I would put it into high-end fight. And when we took a look at the retirement numbers, what we're talking about is 3% of the entire KC-135 fleet. And we're managing risk across the board. We're managing shortages in bombers, tankers, ISR, fighters, command and control. And so tankers is one area that we are having to manage. And so that's why in the beginning I mentioned that that was one of the most difficult decisions we had to make in game, was to ask for us to take risk in the tanker business.
I appreciate, and I'd ask General Lyons some further backup on the plans.
Yes.
Because for want of a nail, the horse was lost. For one of the horse, the battle. We don't want
Right.
to lose a battle because we can't get our airmen and their horses to the battlefront.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.